Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
For the ones who aren't here physically, but are watching, I want you to look right now, because if you're like the folks here, you're going to find that you're nervous or anxious or uptight, because almost everybody here's feeling. And when I look deep in their guts, I don't see anxious. What I see is excited. You can't be in this new energy. You can't be making stuff happen. You can't be riding this new wave without a little bit of excitement happening. If I'm right about this stuff, and I think I am, this is something this world has been waiting tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of years to see, to experience. And it's going on now. And you guys are feeling it. You guys are experiencing it. And when that happens, you get excited. Now, I want you, for those of you who aren't real good with your own emotions, which is pretty much everybody, to imagine that you're 4 years old and you still believe in Santa Claus. Not the Dutch Santa Claus with his little black slaves, a more traditional Santa Claus without slaves. Right? It's Christmas morning. You've just got out of bed and run downstairs and you see all these presents under the tree. You can't open them yet because mom and dad aren't up. Right? And you run into their room and jump on their bed to try and wake them up because this is Christmas and you want to see what Santa brought you. Wow, just imagine this and see what you feel. See what's going on inside. I'm willing to bet that your heart rate goes up, that your shoulders get kind of tense and you feel it in your jaw, and that your hands are kind of tense, like they want to do something, they want to open presents. And your blood pressure, if you have a sphygmomanometer handy, your blood pressure is a little higher. I know you're 4, you don't know what a sphygmomanometer is, but that's okay. If you had one, you could measure your blood pressure. And so your blood pressure's up and your breathing's faster and you got tension in your shoulders and your hands. And if you look, all of these things seem like indicators of fear or anger. Because in your life, you've known lots of fear. Everybody here has been afraid. The more sensitive you are, the more in your life you felt afraid. The feelings are the same. The increased heart rate, increased respiration, increased blood pressure, the shoulders tensing up, the hands wanting to do something. This set of feelings is what happens when you're excited. Oh my God, this is really cool. I want to start opening the presents. I want to see what's here. I want to see what Santa or the angels or whoever has brought for me. I want to see what's out there. I want to feel it. I want to touch it. This is excitement. If you think it's fear, if you decide it's fear and interpret it as fear, you're going to find yourself trying to ground and get rid of it and let it go and be all quiet and serious and proper. But this is a bit like Christmas morning. This time in the history of our world is a bit like Christmas morning. This is a time when it's okay to be excited. You don't have to ground it. You don't have to shut it down. You can feel it. And you can let it come up here and get into your emotions. And what you're going to feel, if you let it come up, is some emotions bouncing around. Maybe uncertainty, maybe curiosity, maybe some self-doubt, maybe some excitement, maybe some wonder. And if you let it keep coming up, it's going to come up here and become passion or intensity, something fiery. And you let it come up far enough, it eventually reaches the heart. And it's going to become this huge expanding of the heart that it changes everything. It rewires your life. It redefines who you are. But see, it can't get up here unless it passes through these earlier stages. So down here in the joy center, when you start feeling it firing and pinging, don't ground that. It's not fear. When it's making it up to here and your guts are going, oh my God, what is it? I don't know. It's new, it's strange, it's uncomfortable. Don't get rid of that. That's joy starting to bubble up and become excitement. Let it. Encourage it. Intentionally plant your toes in the ground and source up even more energy into it. So there's even more joy and more excitement. And bring it up and make it bigger and stronger. So something in you is going, yay! And if you have a sense of the kid piece inside, find that little kid piece and tell it it's okay to jump up and down and run up and down the stairs and stomp around the house and make noise and play T-Rex and all the stuff that little kids are told not to do by their parents because they should be quiet and proper and seen and not heard. Tell that little kid inside it's okay. And once that little kid figures it out, then tell yourself, the person who's driving, that it's okay. If you want to get up and jump up and down right now, it's okay. Now me, I tend to be very quiet. And I tend to be very intense. And sometimes a little bit scary. But see, that's just me. The energy comes up all the way up through me. And so the excitement, the intensity, the passion is working a lot deeper in me than it does in most people. So if you look at me and try and be like me, quiet and proper, you're missing something. First, you have to go through the stages where it's joy and excitement, and enthusiasm and passion and inspiration and the opening of the heart and moving all the way up to here. Those have to all come online. And when you've got a volcano of energy flowing up and through, then it will start getting deeper and deeper inside you 5, 10, 20 years from now. And then you may find that you're more inclined to be quiet. And then you do it because it's right for you. But you don't do it because it's what I'm doing. Let that energy come up. Let it be excited. And if it wants to say yippee, then say yippee. And if it wants to jump up and down or stomp around the house and, make T-Rex noises, wants to run out in the yard and run in circles and scream or dance or sing or whatever the excitement wants, it's okay. You can't shut down the excitement and be healthy and alive. So what I want you all to realize right now, everybody, whether you're here or not, is that it feels a lot like fear. Oh my God, something's wrong. But it's not fear. It's excitement. You need to start saying, oh my God, something's right. Something's cool. Something's happening. And that it's okay for it to be happening. Questions on that? Okay. Wasn't really how I wanted to start tonight, but because so many people are experiencing it, I figure I'll just spell it out. What I think I'll tell you a bit about tonight comes with a warning. It's going to make some of you anxious or uncertain or afraid. You're not really. It's excitement. You just need to find that excitement and feed it up into it. Alright, so energy's coming up through the ball of your feet and up through your legs and into your roots and being pumped throughout your body. And it comes up, and the first place it comes into is the joy center, and you get excited. And the next place is the emotion, and all these new emotions come up. And for most people, emotions are scary, but they don't have to be, right? So most of you have been clearing out gut muck and getting okay with your emotions, and you're trying to bring that energy up into your hearts. But there are two things in the way. Two things that are going to cause you trouble. And one of them is right here. If you follow your rib cage up to where it meets in the center, and there's a place where if you push in there, it actually hurts. There's a little loose piece of bone connected by cartilage called the xiphoid process. Right? That spot right there where the ribs come together. Right inside there. There's a little circle. And we call that circle, following the Indian tradition, your third chakra, your social chakra. And see, most people, their head's not even on line. They'll tell you they're smart and they think with their head, but this is not even online yet. What they're thinking with is this. And the reason I say that, besides the fact that this is what all the experts will tell you, is that if you think about the kind of thinking they're doing, it's usually, you said thank you, so I have to say you're welcome. You said how are you, so I have to say fine, thanks, how are you? It's a math problem with a plus sign in the middle, so I have to add up the numbers. It's a traffic jam, so I have to wait patiently. All of this kind of thinking is simple cause and effect rules. It's not, let me scan this at a deep level and see what's appropriate, and then engage all of my cognitive capacity and come up with the appropriate solution. It's just a series of rules. It's no more fancy than a simple computer program. If this happens, then do that. If this happens, then do that. And the smartest people in your world, the people who are the professors and the mathematicians, they're the experts at this kind of thinking. They've just got a lot more of these if-then rules. They are not thinking. They are simply responding based on if-then kind of rules. And see, it's here in this third chakra, in this mind that most people think with, that we have all the social stuff. Like you're supposed to dress a certain way when you're outside or people will dislike you. Like you can't make noise because people will be unhappy. Like you have to say you're welcome when somebody says thank you. Or you have to say thank you when they give you something, even if you don't like it. You have to tell them you're fine when they ask how you are, even if you're not fine. All of these kind of rules live here in this first mind, in this lower level mind. And this is the first thing that's going to slow you down, or one of the two things that's really going to slow you down, bringing all those cool emotions up here into the heart, is this first mind. Because maybe the first mind gets excited and it makes you want to jump up and down and say, yippee! But I challenge you, any one of you, to go to a public place where there are lots of people walking around, maybe some of them even know you, and just think about jumping up and down and saying yippee. You don't have to do it, just think about it. And watch something go, ooh, no, not that! People won't like it. People will be angry, they'll be scared, they'll be frightened. Imagine walking up to a complete stranger, someone it scans, and just touching them gently and saying, I love you. Or you're okay. Or it's going to be okay. Or I know what you're going through. You're not alone. Now, these kind of things can change someone's life. A touch, a few words. But just imagine doing that with a stranger in your hometown, in the place where you live. And you're going to find something in here that goes, eep! I can't do that. That's not proper. That's not societally approved. They might call the police. They might complain. They might say something mean to me. This third chakra where everything lives is one of our biggest handicaps. And it's why the elf path teaches you to scan from the very earliest stages. So it might be proper to have syrup on your pancakes or milk in your coffee or something like that. It might be proper because you've always done it that way. But if you scan it, you might find you really don't want syrup on your pancakes. If you scan it out, you might be happier with jam or tuna or something very different. But until you can scan, you're just going to go by the rules. So we teach you to scan so that you can begin to move past all of the rules, all of the constraints, this wall of should and shouldn't, this cage that's built for you here. And you guys are working through that. You're learning to scan. You're learning to get rid of gut muck. You're learning to make the right choice for you, for what scans, for what's appropriate. And you're learning to do this every day. The Elf Path is teaching it. So this is one of the two barriers that sits between the emotions and the heart. And you'll keep working on that for probably as long as you live in this world. You'll keep learning to scan and act from the guts and the heart rather than from the rules. And you'll get better at it, but you'll keep working on it. Now the other one, the other piece that gets in the way is right here at the top of the second chakra. And this is where sexuality comes from. Traditionally, now, some people look at the stuff I'm talking about and say, oh, this is spirituality. This is spiritual stuff. And it's not. This is life stuff. This is how you get out of bed, in the morning. It's how you breathe. It's how you talk to people. It's how you know what you really want and how you do that. How you know who you really are and how you be that. This is just life. If it is spirituality in any sense, it's spirituality in a Native American sense. In a culture that had no word for spirituality. That had no separate idea of God. Because every breath, every hunt, every greeting, everything they built, everything they did, every piece of clothing they put on, it was all spiritual for them. Everything in every moment was fundamentally spiritual for them. And so they had no separate word. They didn't go to church because this is the spiritual time. When they got out of bed, it was a spiritual experience. When they put their clothes on, it was a spiritual experience. When they ate their breakfast, it was a spiritual experience. When they ran through the woods or caught an animal for dinner or made a new set of clothes or sat and watched the sunset, every one of these were spiritual experiences. And this is what really I'm trying to share with you. Not a religion, not a spirituality in the sense of, well, here's my life and then here's the spiritual icing we put on top of it. No, I'm talking about something that weaves through every single component of your life. Every breath, every sneeze, every moment, every instant. This stuff, the real stuff, is waking up in us. Now, when this happens, when this energy starts to come up, it hits our sexual center. And every single one of us, even the ones who have a traditional spirituality and say, oop, sexuality goes here and spirituality goes here, and there's a big DMZ between them. They don't mix. Or the ones who say, I have no sexual component. I simply live without that. It never affects me. Because there are both of these kinds of people. Those who want to demonize it and lock it up, or those who claim it doesn't exist. Even for these kinds of people, they have a sexual center. And if they've got this completely shut down, I have no sexuality, nope, not me, it's not part of me, then they have no heart. Your heart cannot be online with energy coming up without going through here. It just doesn't work. Right? It's like eating something and expecting it to get into your guts without going through your stomach. Doesn't work. This is in between. It's got to go through there. And that energy comes up, it's going to affect your sexuality. And so I want to talk to you tonight about how sexuality is changing. Now, I've told you, and those of you who can scan and those of you who are paying attention have probably seen already some of what I'm telling you. In the past, 5 to 10% of the people were sexually attracted to their own gender, and 90 to 95% attracted to the other gender. And this has been normal. And I've had people ask me, well, how can homosexuality even exist? How is it possible? I mean, clearly we live by passing on our genetics. And gay people, well, they're not passing on the genetics. How come it still exists? And I'll tell you that it exists. It exists because it's something spiritual. Now, you don't realize this. You think, well, maybe, depending on your upbringing, you either think, well, it's just a lifestyle choice, or in the more extreme case, ooh, it's evil, it's bad. I'm telling you it's something spiritual. Again, to reference back to the Native Americans, there were Native American tribes who felt that homosexual people were the only ones who could become real shamans. that heterosexual people, heterosexual men, had a male energy and were attracted to women. Heterosexual women had a female energy and were attracted to men. But a heterosexual man or woman had both the male and female energies. In some cultures, they were called the twin-souled. They were ones who were more awake, more aware, more spiritually alive, more in tune. And I'm telling you, I don't have to believe me, but I'm telling you based on what I can sense and on a lifetime, at least one lifetime of working with people, that this is so. That those who live a homosexual lifestyle have more than the rest of the world. They have a kind of twin soul. They have both the male and the female energies working through them. And when you can take that beyond just the emotions or the sexual center and bring that all the way up to the heart, that twin soul, you have the chance to create something phenomenal, to be far more than you otherwise would have been. And so some of you may be confused or disturbed at the idea that much of the world is going to become homosexually rather than heterosexually based. And I say this is good news. This is a thing to celebrate. Because what's going to happen is with this, a much greater spirituality is going to start coming up in everybody. There's going to be a lot less fear about, I don't understand, women saying, I just don't get men, they're crazy, they're all dogs, whatever. And men saying, I just don't get women, they're a mystery, they're too confusing. That's going to be gone. Because increasingly you're going to be attracted to people much more like yourself and you're going to understand. Things like, oh, I can't have sex because I might get pregnant and that's going to screw up my whole life. Well, that's just not so much an issue when you're involved with someone of your same gender. So a lot of the fears, a lot of the panic, a lot of the chaos is going to go away. And it's going to become much easier to be okay with sexuality. Now, I'd like to talk to you a little bit tonight about how can you become more okay with this. And when I do that, it's going to be a little awkward for some of you. Now, some of you have children. Some of the Elf Path people have kids. So clearly you have a sex life. Some of you have talked to me about your lovers. Some of you I know have never had a lover. So I know that there's a degree of experience in here, that it varies. For those of you who do have some experience, you will recognize you end up being attracted to someone like your parents. Now, this is something that every young person says, no way, not going to happen. And every person who's lived long enough and had more than one or two lovers has found. Now, in this lifetime, back when I was just another human like most other humans around me, I didn't get involved sexually until I was 25. Because like a lot of the new kids, I sensed so much and was so overwhelmed by it, confused by it, I just ignored it. And fortunately, I found someone who was a very kind and gentle teacher to get me involved. The second person that I dated, the second serious person I dated, a woman from the Middle East, and it was the worst relationship I've ever had. She was cruel. She was always insulting me. She'd get angry and throw shit around. She got physically violent only once. I was smart enough even then to say, no, that's not okay. That stops now. You ever do that again, I'm throwing your ass out and you're not coming back. So it wasn't physically violent, but it was violent in every other way. Every day, constant criticism, constant abuse, constant just violence. It was ugly. And after this relationship, I was so screwed up, it took me 2 years to date anybody else. You might think, all right, this guy's pretty sensitive. He's pretty aware. Why would he end up with someone so abusive and stay with it? And I look back now and I ask this question, why would I stay in something so obviously destructive and painful and wrong? I mean, here I'm getting beat up every day. Why do I stay with this? And I imagine there are lots of others out there in abusive relationships, physically or emotionally or otherwise abusive, asking, why do I stay in this? But see, as that relationship was ending, my folks sent me one of those big plastic cassette tapes from back when, cassette tapes still were used. When I was a child, they had one of the little Super 8 cameras. It didn't have audio in it. It actually recorded on a little reel. And they had these little reel-to-reel things that, noisy clackety-clack things and no sound and really lousy picture. But you could put it in a projector and project it up on the wall. And that was as close as we had to the fancy digital recording you guys got today. When I was in graduate school and just closing off this relationship, they sent me a cassette tape where they'd had someone take all of these reels from my childhood and put them all together on a single cassette tape. And so I sat down and watched this. And it wasn't until I watched this, until I saw my mother at age 22 or 23. And she had exactly the same build as the woman I was dating. And she had exactly the same hair color and hairstyle, and the way she talked to people was exactly the same, and the way she moved, it was disturbing. It was creepy how similar these two women were. The woman I was dating was an almost exact copy of the woman who raised me. And it was then that I realized, up till then I said, dating my parents, that'll never happen, I hate my parents. No. But even though my parents had disowned me and I hadn't talked to them in years at that point, I still found myself dating a copy of my mother. And it was really disturbing. And I spent a couple years digging those pieces out, the pieces inside that said I had to have someone like my mother, and I had to have someone who was verbally and emotionally abusive, someone who was critical and unkind. And it took me a couple of years because I didn't have, the elf path that you guys do and the process that showed me how to get through this. It took me a couple of years to dig this out. And when I did and finally got to a place where I was okay with it, I could begin to take the emotional and sexual energies, they're very tied up there, same center here. I could begin to take those and recognize them as just part of me. And so as I began to recognize and integrate them, they didn't control me anymore. And so I could look at a person who was similar to the woman who raised me, who was critical, who was abusive, who was built the same, without feeling this desperate need to date her. Now, I'm more intuitive than most people, and have been my whole life. By orders of magnitude more than some. More aware. I have spent my whole life watching people and saying, why do they do this, and how does that happen, and what causes this, and why that thing? And even with that, I still found myself dating my mother. And so I'm telling you, I don't care who you are, if you haven't found all of the mom and dad energies inside, specifically the ones linked to your sexuality, at some point you're going to end up dating someone like your parents. And it's probably not going to be good for you. It's going to happen. Now, that's the easy part, because there are whole textbooks about this. And you can find your way through that. Here's where it gets interesting. See, the world is moving from a place where it was almost completely heterosexual over here to a place where it's almost completely homosexual. And that doesn't happen instantly. Now, on a cataclysmic scale, if you look at all the changes since the Pleistocene era, this has been happening in just an instant, a very tiny slice of time. But really, that slice of time has been the last 50 or 60 years. The world has been increasingly moving towards awareness of homosexuality, acceptance of homosexuality, embracing homosexual marriage and homosexual relationships, and the right of homosexuals to live a normal life and have visitation rights in hospitals and, raise children and all these things. The world's beginning to become okay with these things. There are cultures that are completely okay with them and ones that still oppose them aggressively, but in general, the world is moving more towards okay. And this has been going on for a long time. in terms of your lifespan, 50 or 60 years. And so in this process, every single person has been becoming more homosexual. Now, this includes your parents. This includes your grandparents. Over the last 50 to 60 years, there's been an increasing movement in that direction. Now, they may not be aware of it. You can go ask the man and woman who raised you. Says, oh my God, no, not me, no, never. But you can watch them if you're sensitive enough and you can sense that it's there. There was an experiment done in, I think, the University of Kentucky some years back, where they took a bunch of people and gave them a questionnaire of their attitudes on homosexuality. And the ones who had the most violent attitudes, this is evil, I hate it, these people are awful, rah, 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 all this bile and venom. They then took and directly measured their sexual reaction as to how turned on they got when they showed them gay porn. And it did it very directly. They put a little rubber band with a meter around their penis. And so when these guys got excited, the thing expanded. They couldn't argue with it. It's a very direct measurement. And what they found is that the more angry and violent and aggressive the person was in denying it, the stronger response they had. It was a direct correlation. And this is scientific evidence of what most of us know anecdotally. Those who are most angry and aggressive in opposing homosexuality are the ones who have something deep inside that draws them in that direction, and they're fighting it. So if your parents are telling you, oh, no way, not going to happen, well, the more strongly they fight, the more likely it is there. Now, I understand that I'm talking about sexuality, which makes people nervous, and homosexuality, which makes people nervous. I'm going to make you even more nervous here. 200 years ago, if you were a heterosexual person, a boy, you'd grow up and date someone like your mom. A girl would grow up and date someone like her dad. What happens when your folks are increasingly leaning towards a homosexual lifestyle and you inside are being fundamentally drawn? 90 to 95% of you, I think it's about 94 point something, but percent of you are going to end up, say in 50 years, 90 to 95% of the population is going to be gay. That's most of you. So, gay children growing up imprinting on parents who are at least poking subconsciously at gay energies. What's going to happen? Little girls are not going to grow up and end up dating someone like dad. They're going to grow up and end up being attracted to someone like mom. Now, it doesn't just have to be mom. If you've got a case where you were raised with a nanny or someone who took care of you in formative years of your life, it may be that person imprinted on your young sexuality, and you're going to find someone who reminds you of that. If there was a coach in a sport you did who was very strong or very caring or very active in your life, someone you really approved of, you may have had your young sexuality imprint on that coach. And it doesn't just have to be your parents. Anyone who was a strong imprint. I knew a woman at one point, when she was a child, the pastor in their church was a woman. And she was a very good friend of this girl's family, and she'd come over, have Sunday dinner with them every week. She was very much a part of their lives, and this little girl looked up to her immensely. And eventually, the pastor came out that she was gay, and while the church was willing to accept a woman as a pastor, they wouldn't take a gay woman, and they kicked her out. And so this whole experience really imprinted on this little girl. And when I knew her, she was in her 20s. And very unhappy with dating men and didn't like men and didn't trust men. And fundamentally, she was attracted to women. And when she could be honest about it, she was attracted to women like this pastor, like this woman who'd made such a big impression on her in her childhood. It wasn't her mom she imprinted on, it was this other woman. Now, if you take a puppy and put it into a house. And that house has a lot of loud, obnoxious, noisy people running around, slamming doors and getting in fistfights and, just aggressive and wild. That dog is going to grow up kind of aggressive and wild and making a lot of noise. If you put it in a house with, say, some older people, a nursing home, say, where the people all move slowly and they're quiet, that dog is more likely to imprint, unless it's one of the little yippy dogs that are always wired. It's going to imprint on the people around it, and it's going to act more quiet. In a house where everybody is kind and gentle and affectionate, a dog that lives there is likely to grow up and become much more kind and gentle and affectionate. All of you perhaps have seen that dogs tend to reflect the people they live with. They tend to actually start to look like them after a while. See, when your sexuality starts to wake up, it doesn't have anybody saying, here's what you need to do. At best, you had a parent who said, okay, let me tell you about the birds and the bees, and I hate this part, but I'll do it. Or maybe you found a textbook with clinical pictures and horrifying diagrams of STDs. Generally speaking, you didn't have someone say, this is an amazing part of your life. In the same way they didn't teach you to celebrate your emotions and to handle them effectively. They didn't teach you to celebrate your sexuality and handle it effectively. Well, when you take a dog and throw him into a house and don't train him, he doesn't know how to behave. He just imprints on the people around him and builds his own way. Your sexuality was never trained in a healthy way. Nobody ever said, here's what you're going to go through, and here's what it's going to feel like, and here's why you should celebrate it, and here's, the parts that are messy, and here's the parts that are fun, and, let's talk about it, and as you explore it, I'll be here to answer your questions. That didn't happen. Now, if you were one of those very rare cases where you had a parent who helped you, you're probably about 1 in a million. For most of you, your sexuality was an abandoned creature. People kind of looked at it and said, oh, that thing over there, just ignore it. And so it didn't know how to behave and how to grow up and how to be a healthy part of you, and so it imprinted on somebody. It found someone it thought was impressive and it copied them. And it's still imprinted on them. So, in this modern world, if you're a woman, it's probably actually imprinted on a woman. And if you're a man, it's probably imprinted on a man. And that's going to seem a bit strange, but this is how the world is changing. This is what it's becoming. This is who we are. And so, what I would encourage you to do, in the same way that you explore gut muck and get to know the crazy emotions in your guts, is to start bringing energy into your sexual center, which is at the top of your second chakra here. Bringing that energy in and feeding energy up into it and making it big and shiny. And when it does, it's going to hit places where there's, garbage or muck around it. You're going to have to clear that. And when it does, you're going to have, fear come up or anxiety. Oh my God, I don't want that in my life. Or you're going to have seen a movie or read a story at one point that is going to be triggered when you start bringing this energy up. And maybe it'll be uncomfortable. You're going to have to handle it in the same way you do gut muck. As you bring this energy up and you find the messy places, you just recognize them, you feel them, experience them, and ground them and get rid of them. And you build something healthier in its place. Roja has been teaching you about turning your entire first mind, your entire first, second, and third chakra here, into the image of a castle. And what you can do as you begin to explore this is actually create a room or a series of rooms in that castle. That's a playroom, strictly dedicated to sexuality. And perhaps you want to create a harem in there with lots of different people. Perhaps you want sheep in your harem, right? Perhaps you've got a rack you want to be tied to or tie someone to. See, nobody's going to know what's in your castle but you. And so I'm going to tell you, whatever comes up, if you want to build this into your playrooms and try it, just do it with integrity. Do it with who you really are. And you may find that you really do want to explore bondage. Say it's part of your life. And you may find that it's just, a bad memory from another lifetime and you clear it and it's gone. Explore that, right? I've told you some of this stuff before. This is a piece to continue working on, the awakening of the sexuality and the developing of the whole playroom in your castle. This is the piece that's new. That is, if you're a woman, some part of you has imprinted on a strong woman from your childhood. 95% chance, which is, pretty close to 100%. If you're a male, some part of you has imprinted on a strong male from your childhood or early teen years. And for most of you, that's going to be mom or dad. And so what I need you to do when you start stimulating the sexual center, what I'm asking you to do is start looking for mom or dad. Now, most people, you say mom or dad and sexuality, they immediately go, ooh, get those things apart from, get them away. Oh, that's gross. Don't talk about that. Even seeing mom and dad kiss, they complain about it. But you're here, right? So by definition, your mom and dad have probably been sexually involved. It's a pretty rare case if they haven't. You're here. That was part of their life, right? Mom and dad have a sexuality. It's time for you to start to explore it. Now, how does that work? Well, this is difficult to do with a partner because you'll have to be able to talk with them about what's going on and explore the ideas and such. And most of them just simply aren't awake enough yet to explore those things with. So to start out, I'm going to encourage you to explore this on your own. You can do it by writing stories. You can do it by just closing your eyes and fantasizing. You can do it by looking at pictures. However you approach this, I encourage you at the start, as you come up from the emotions to sexuality, to play with it on your own. To just by yourself, when no one's around, to explore it. Create a fantasy, something that turns you on, and explore it. And then while you're exploring it, if you're a man, use your dad. If you're a mom, use your woman. Just have them walk into the room. They don't have to say anything. Just stand there and watch. Just so that they're part of the picture. And if it freaks you out too much, well, then you kick them out, and when you're ready, you start over. But eventually you should get to the point where inside you can have your mom or your dad, your same-sex parents, just watch. And if that's too much, put them in the next room and just have them listen. And then afterwards, go out and talk to them about it. Gee, Dad, was I too loud? Oh, no, it sounds like you're having fun. And, Mom, what do you think? Or, just get them inside, in your mind, to start being involved. Don't try it in the physical world. Your mom and dad won't be supportive. Generally, moms and dads are using a little older energy, and they're not going to be okay with this. But in your fantasies, now I understand that some of you, maybe your mom's no longer with us, right? This makes it more difficult. But see, your mom was here when your sexual center was first starting. And so you may have to find some way to go back in time to find when she was still here, when she was still alive and healthy, and talk with that woman about it back then. I'm not sure how that's going to work for you. I mean, people eventually die, so many of us, our parents, are dead. That's something we have to figure out how to work with. But see, the fundamental idea here is that your sexuality is imprinted on one or both of your parents. And so everything that you do sexually is going to have them involved. And while you're refusing to look at it, they're not just lurking in the shadows. They're in bed with you. You're just pretending they're not. Your parents are there, and your lover's parents are there, and it's a very crowded bed you're in. But when you can start to make it conscious, even if it's just having them standing, just opening the door and peeking in, you start to become aware of them. And you start to sense their energies involved in your sexuality. You start to say, oh my God, it really is there. And when you start to sense it, you can start to disentangle it. And you can start to take them, not your physical mom and dad, the mom and dad you were when you were a child, the one you've copied inside, you can start to find them. And you can start to disconnect them from your sexuality and move them out a little bit and maybe go into your castle space and talk to them. You know, hi, Dad, what are you doing in my sexuality? Well, I don't know. You put me here. All right, well, let's see how we can unplug you and start taking you out so you can go sleep with your own people and not mine. And, you know, hi, Mom, what are you doing here? Do you really belong? Well, you know, I want to tell you what to do. Yes, but you shouldn't. So it's time for you to move along. And I guarantee for every one of you this is going to be awkward. Because most of you, when it comes to mom or dad and sexuality, you don't even want to think about it. And when it's actually the same-sex parents, when you recognize that next time you get in bed with someone, your mom is climbing in bed with you, and she's right there watching and making comments the whole time, right? Your dad is climbing in bed with you and being involved in the whole process, constantly criticizing and telling you what you're doing wrong. When you can start to realize those energies are there and they're screwing you up. They're making you uncomfortable with yourself, afraid to have sex, afraid to care about people, afraid to express yourself. And it's not just you. If you're actually sleeping with someone, or 2 people, or 3 people, or 5 people, however many it is, every one of them has their parents in there too. And so, the very first step in all that we do is awareness. So this is what I'm going to recommend. Start exploring your sexuality however you're comfortable, and just put your mom or dad in the same room, just watching. And eventually, you know, maybe they'll start making comments. And then you'll have to stop right in the middle of your fantasy, whatever it is, and explain something to them or handle them in some way. You may actually find that if you're paying attention, they're trying to crawl in bed with you. Because that energy is there with you. Whenever your sexuality gets activated, whoever you've imprinted on is there with you. So as you can start to be aware, you can start to go inside and say, aha, I see you, I understand. Now I'm going to start unplugging you. I thank you for your help, but I don't need you anymore. I'm going to rebuild my sexuality based on Katon, the true self, based on my awakening awareness of the heart and what it is to really love people, based on emotions and integrity, based on the holy child energies and the sacred. I'm going to rebuild my sexuality and make it a thing to celebrate. And to do that, I've got to take critical dad and nagging mom out of the picture. But to do that, I've got to be aware that mom and dad are there. So this is my recommendation for now. Build this sacred playroom inside with whatever kinky or fun or exciting or comfortable, beautiful things you want in there. And as you begin to explore, watch for mom and dad. And if you can't find them, just imagine them walking into the room. Just intentionally bring their energy into your fantasy and see if anything triggers. And maybe it's not there. Maybe you've got dad and not mom wired into it. Maybe you've got mom and not dad. Right? Maybe you've got a coach or a preacher or a nanny or someone from your childhood. But these people are there because no one ever trained this properly. It imprinted. It made up its own path. It just made copies of those people. Right? That's what I mean by imprinting. It reached out and copied what it perceived of them into here. And that's how it built itself. And so there are still copies of them in there. Just as your primary male and female caregivers will be in your men and fen nodes. You've worked on this stuff. In the sexual center, there's going to be one or more of your caregivers, probably between the time you're 8 and 13, 14. Yeah, probably younger, 8 to 13 is when you're really imprinting them. And from there, it grows into its own shape and form. But when it's just getting started, it has no idea how. And so it just copied someone in, and that someone is still there. And you're going to find you're attracted to people like that, or really repelled by people like that. You know, one side or the other of attraction. It's going to be there. And you're going to find that these things still exist in you. So what I want you to do is to start exploring them on purpose. See, the good news is you don't got to tell anybody about this. Nobody's got to know what your fantasies are. Maybe you end up actually going through a process where you sleep with one of your parents. You don't have to ever tell anybody about it. If that's what it takes to find and disconnect those energies, you do it. Maybe you just have to talk to them very sternly. Maybe you actually have to go through and unplug things and rewire them, or tear down a building and build a new one. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you recognize that their energies are imprinted here in the sexual center, and that it's time to remove them, and that only you can do it. And you can do it only with a great degree of integrity, a willingness to face that there is some part of you that's sexually attracted to your mom or to your dad. And until you can face that, no matter how much you dislike them, or how repulsive that idea or how bothersome that idea might be, until you can face it and find those things, you can't begin to disconnect them. And your sexuality will always be a bit handicapped. It'll always be a little uncomfortable for you. As you can start to disconnect them, then you can start to find, who am I? What do I want to try? What really turns me on? When I toss everybody else out of the picture, what do I like? Do I like tall people? Do I like short people? Do I like boys? Do I like girls? Do I like young, old? Do I really want to have sex with 40 people at the same time? Or am I a one person for the rest of my life kind of person? Only you can figure this out. And they're all okay. They're all okay. But the only way to find it is to go in and look around with open eyes, an open mind, with your guts tuned to as much integrity as possible. So if you find some part of you that is actually sexually attracted to one of your parents, you don't say, ooh, gross, not that. You look at it and you study it, and you move inside it and you open it up, and then you dissolve the thing and ground it until only you are left in there. Until you can at any point close your eyes, go into your castle, find the room or rooms dedicated to sacred sexuality, and really celebrate who you are as a sexual being. Whether it's posters on the wall, or paintings, or plush carpets, or hot tubs, or, swings hanging from the ceiling, or whatever it is in your room, you can go in there and just celebrate it. There's no fear. There's no anxiety. There's no insecurity. There's no shame. There's no guilt. There's just you. Like, this is my room. This is my space. Who I am here is truly me. It's a beautiful, spiritual, amazing being. So I can just go in here and be me. And eventually that peace will be strong enough that you can start sharing it with others. Right? You can find the lover and say, this is who I really am. And have a much more intense, real relationship than you otherwise could have, with mom being there holding on to some things, and dad holding on to other things, and maybe your grandfather in there criticizing, and your nanny in there giving you lectures, and all of these people surrounding the bed. I'm fairly certain I've seen a movie, maybe two, where there's a young man who's very nervous about sex. He gets in bed with a woman for the first time, and in his mind, he hears his mom come in. She's standing next to the bed lecturing him. And then his dad walks in from the other side and starts, oh, you really need to do it this way. Oh, that's going to be a mistake. Don't do that. And then grandma comes in with her cane. I see what you're doing. Is she sits down on the bed next to them and smacks him on the butt. And this is what's going on. All of these people are in there. And I'm telling you, you just can't be healthy and happy until you boot them out. And you can't do that until you become aware of them. So you got to become aware and then rewire this until it's just you, till it's a sacred space and no one's in there but you. And then you can explore it alone or share it with whoever you want. It affects you. I watch it amongst the folks that are here. I watch these things affecting them. I see how it affects them. And so I want you guys to start exploring this. And if any of you are bold enough or brave enough, you can start talking to one another about it. Hey, I found this really weird thing. And someone else might say, I had that same weird thing. Or, I did this with my dad, and it feels really weird. You know what? I had the same thing with my dad. Or, I had the same thing with my mom. If you're, confident enough, bold enough, maybe you can talk about what you find. But see, you can't get healthy here until you get all of the nagging relatives out of the picture. And you can't get them out of the picture until you go inside with an open mind and an open heart and an open awareness and really pay attention to what's there. And when you do, when you're open enough to face it, you can begin to notice what's there, you can begin to disconnect it, and you can begin to live in a way that's really healthy and happy. So I know a lot of uncomfortable stuff here. Talking about sex, for most of you, oh my God, no, not that. Talking about crazy emotions and how they're tied to sexuality, talking about your parents, talking about homosexuality, talking about at some level actually sleeping with your parents. I mean, just all kinds of stuff in here. Some of you, there are a couple out there, have actually had sexual experience with their parents. Whether they've been molested as children or something has gone on in their life, these people, you need to do this too. You, even more strongly than others, are going to have mom or dad woven into your sexuality. You need to go in and find that and clear it out till it's only you left in there. So, for everybody, just handle it with integrity, and as much as possible, handle it with fun. I know it's a little creepy, but if dad's going to stand there and watch, have him say really silly things once in a while. Right? Put him in a really funny hat. If mom's involved, put her in really high heels or a little ballerina outfit or something. I mean, be a little silly if you want to. You don't have to be serious about it. All you got to do is find what's there. Just pay attention to what's there. And the things that shouldn't be there, and that's everything that isn't you, just start unplugging it, dissolving it, and grounding it. Doesn't need to be there. Rebuild your entire emotional, sexual, creative center so that there's only you in there. It's all about you. You're the center. You're it. And your men and fen can be there to support you, and the other things, the other workers in your castle can be there to support you. And I know that some of you think you're beyond this and don't have to worry about it. And some of you don't want to listen. And I'm telling you, I don't care who you are, you need to do this. Everybody needs to do this. And the sooner you start doing it, the better. Really, this is something that should be happening around yellow belt, because yellow belt's when you're exploring the guts. By orange belt, you're already moving up towards the social stuff, and it should be done by then. So this is something that should be started really early on. It's not something we wait till they're black belts and you're comfortable with it, because you'll never be comfortable with it if you go that way. It's something that we need to start working with now. It's important to understand that sexuality is no more strange or confusing or scary than digestion. You eat, you go to the toilet. It's how life works. Our sexuality is no more complicated or scary than that. It's a simple physical response. Now, it gets tied into emotions, and eventually it can get tied into our love and compassion for other people, and it can be really wonderful. But at its fundamental physical component, it's no different than heart rate or respiration or digestion. So quit seeing it as something scary. Just recognize it as part of you. Make a little sacred space inside and start exploring it. And when you're comfortable enough and strong enough, talk to other people about it and share your findings, because other people are going through the same thing. No matter how weird or strange it is, someone out there is going through the same thing. So be gentle with yourself, have fun, but really seriously take a look at this. See if you can get this important part of you free. Free of your parents, of your grandparents, of the folks you grew up with. Because until you do, all the energy trying to come up through there to get to the heart is going to be squeezed down. It's going to be bent out of shape. So explore this. Play with it. Forgive yourself. Forgive the other people in your life. Begin to let these energies go. And try and return to just being kind, gentle, calm, aware. And as you do, you'll begin to recognize that sexuality and sexual excitement and sexual curiosity, they're just part of life. And they can be a really fun part of life. Not a scary or bad or dangerous part. They can be really wonderful. They can bring a lot of fun and excitement and joy to your life. And they can be a great way to express and share that joy with others. So, before I leave, I'll just say, take this seriously as far as paying attention to it, but don't take it seriously as far as being serious. Right? Really pay attention to it, be lighthearted, and explore it with as much integrity and focus as you can. And you'll find that a lot of things in your life start getting easier. That's enough for tonight. See y'all next time.